We're going to talk about the right way, the wrong way, and the worst way to collect watches. And at the end of the day, I think horror stories are a lot of fun in retrospect. We've lived all of them, so we can share them safely here. We also hope that in the process of talking about things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and things that are hilariously regretted, we can help you a little bit on your collecting journey. I appreciate everyone coming out. I know you had to register for this, so we're going to spam you with a million emails, which is what we do, but you can delete those. The good news, though, is that your memory of tonight will be an indelible positive, and for that, we thank you. Okay, so as we wait for our final members to file in, I want to introduce my companions here tonight and thank both of them for being here. Armin Johnston, he's my longtime podcast partner. He's one of our senior client advisors. He's been with the company since I've been with the company. We're brothers in arms. Phil Toledano, he's a well-known artist, Instagrammer, and the creator of the Toledano and Chan line of contemporary retro watches. Ask him about the one he's wearing tonight. So we're going to talk a little bit about the right way, the wrong way, the worst way to collect watches. So let's just start with something that's salacious and scintillating. Horror stories. Guys, what are the worst experiences you've had buying a watch?
Shit. It's actually going to be a massive snooze fest because I feel like, I guess the very first watch I bought from a place in the city, which I won't mention, but it wasn't a terrible experience. It's just after I bought it years later, I looked back on the watch and realized I was just totally bamboozled, because it was polished so it was like a river pebble. It looked like it was so worn and abused, but I had no idea. And then when I look back, I was like, wow, I knew nothing. And at the time, it was $3,000, which I thought was an insane amount of money.
Oh, I can't believe that.
Well, if you're not a watch person, $3,000 is a shitload of money. But if you're a watch person, it's like a round of drinks, basically. So it's not really a horror story. It was just amazing to look back and see how little I knew.
Okay, so I have a genuine horror story that I'm sharing secondhand. So guys, just keep in mind, no sympathy necessary. The dude recovered, but. So, once upon a time in a European country very close to Eastern Europe, a gentleman was searching for a particular kind of watch. Let's say it's the kind that allegedly takes 1 year to make. And he was looking with the one from the 90s with the Zenith movement. So we know we're all talking about 5-digit Rolex Daytonas here. So he had a number in mind that he wanted to pay, and he searched Chrono 24 again and again and again, and the number was not coming up. The watches were either stock photos, or the person promised the watch but couldn't deliver the watch. He eventually found one with a verifiably real photo. Okay, first thing you do when you have a watch that seems too good to be true is you ask the person who has it, who wants to collect your money, whether he could set the time. Because then you at least know that the person has the watch in their custody. Okay, so the person set the time and the watch was real. Now, once this is done, he asks if the person will take cash to evade various types of tax situations, and the person is all too eager to do so. Another warning. So he asks, where can we meet? Can we meet at a bank? Can we meet at a postal office, a public place, well lit, well attended? And the person says, well, actually, I'm going to be in town for just a hot minute right over the border at a service depot for trucks. And so, first of all, now we're at a nighttime Eastern European truck stop. So, you would think this would be like alarm bells going off, red lights flashing, but you know, the guy sees the red mist, he's got the thrill of the chase, and he's got the scent of the quarry, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna go through with this. And he shows up with the cash at the truck stop in the middle of the night. And I know where you think this is going, but he does get the watch. What he doesn't realize, undoubtedly unnerved by the circumstances and the whole slipshod fashion of the exchange, is that the watch was not real. So it looked awfully good in the hot minute, and he paid the money, and he didn't get killed or kidnapped or robbed, at least not in the way you expect. But because this whole thing was so high pressure and so tense and so in the moment, he didn't have the opportunity to let his better instincts catch up with him. He got home with the watch on the other side of the border, bereft of his money, and now he's wearing what amounts to a dummy. So it was a case that looked like a watch, that had a bracelet, that felt respectably weighty in the dark because it was full of lead. But it was not a watch, but a watch-shaped object. So again, if you're gonna do a deal in person, bring a friend, do it in broad daylight, get it on camera, and make sure the guy's not offering the lowest possible price on Chrono 24 for that watch. What do you got, Armand?
Oh gosh,
Hard to beat that, man. I mean, my story is boring. Yours is interesting.
I got another one that involves a bunch of girls, a spiked drink, and a Galenda wagon, but that's for another time.
As someone who spent some time, in the early morning hours with too much cash at a truck stop, that's a nightmare. My story.
How was diesel while you were there? Was it too high?
For a good time, Call. My story is, I have two stories actually. The first one is modern, the second is personal and vintage. We, for a few years, had a location in Dubai, and this story happened in 2022. A gentleman came into our Dubai office and met with a colleague and friend of ours, who I think everybody in the room will probably know, Siquan. And he came in with a briefcase full of 50th anniversary Audemars Piguets. So this was shortly after they came out, and I guess not so shortly. What had happened in the meantime was there was kind of a bit of a rise and fall in the AP market, and this guy had a dozen 50th anniversary APs. Chronos, time onlys, no jumbos, nothing that would really stick out as this is extremely special. This is something that's extremely hard to get. Now, granted, Royal Oaks were hard to get. There was probably an 1159 in there somewhere. Ultimately, we didn't make an offer on the watches at the time, and this crushed the gentleman because he had taken loans out to buy the watches. And that is something that you never do. Financing in watches is a very complicated thing. It's a very complicated relationship, and ultimately, it's a personal decision. And in this case, it really worked out poorly for the guy.
Yeah, you don't finance fun. We talk about the worst ways, and here's the reason why. Now, this is supposed to be fun. And as soon as you go into Hock to buy something, you feel the pressure lingering over you. You start thinking about things that you ordinarily would not if you were trying to enjoy your watch. Am I going to scratch it? Am I going to dent it? Should I take the stickers off this watch? What if I have to sell it? Am I diminishing my resale value? Once you've paid cash, sure, you may miss the money, but the watch is yours, and you can wear it like it's yours and not some kind of a lease. I find that when people go into debt to buy a watch, even if they're good for the money, they start treating it like a car on lease. Let me watch the miles, I don't want to scratch it, oh, don't bring your dog in here, that sort of thing.
You're not truly enjoying it.
It's not yours, you're beholden to the bank. So that's why I say you never finance fun. Another great story, and this is a horror story that we averted at the last minute, but back in 2014, we had a person from Crimea saying he was interested in buying a Royal Oak offshore, and we needed a little bit more information. So you would think identification, a bank number, some sort of financial institution that's respectable outside of a conflict zone. Nope, we got a photo of a table covered with stacks of bills.
Seems legit.
Yeah, I would totally do that deal. and this, we were a different company back then. We were South Florida in a strip mall, but we came within a hair's breadth of a guy sending that watch. So that was a horror story averted. But I never forgot that, because that's what happens when you're too eager to make a deal. That was on the selling side, but you could very easily make a bad move on the buying side. So now let's talk about ways like you do want to approach collecting watches. This is good for any level of engagement, whether you're just getting started or you're a veteran. So Phil, tell me a little bit about your journey to collecting and what worked. Let's talk about what works.
I was always a vintage car collector, and I really tried to avoid the miserable cliche of watches and cars. But then I sold a car to Ben Clymer, and then I got kind of sucked into this inexorably into the parallel misery and simultaneous wallet vomiting experience of cars and watches. But for me, I guess I have I'm really curious, but I'm also kind of like a pathological contrarian. So I tend to always resist the gravitational pull of what everyone's looking at and look at other things. But I also tend to churn through things quite quickly. So because I want to experience stuff. I'm really interested in the experience of owning different things. So when I did a talk in watches, and when you look at that video in 2015, I mean, my taste is just dismal. I mean, it was just a very sad collection. But I've been collecting for 8 months, but it was a terrible, terrible thing.
Too much too fast? Is that what?
No, there was the River Pebble Breitling that I had purchased for $3,000. There was the Seiko Giugiaro, which I love saying that name.
Yeah, but then you managed it in one shot too. I usually hook that one.
No, but I went through a lot of stuff. So I went through sort of a military phase. I was a massive vintage Breitling person for a couple of years. I had a Lemania phase. What else did I have? But now I've kind of washed up on the rocky shoals of like 70s Pateks and Rolex Pre-Daytona. Those have been my two focuses. But it's really interesting to kind of churn. The difference between cars and watches is there are so many more nooks and crannies, horologically speaking, than there are cars. Plus, they, at least at the outset, seem more affordable, and they end up not being more affordable in the end. But there are so many just back rooms and windows and doors and sort of weird closets to open and look into with watches. And so actually now what happens is, and what I find interesting with collecting is that, and this happens a lot, I don't know if this happens to you guys, but I will spend years being disgusted by a watch or a brand of watch, right? Like for instance, like old Genta. Like I spent years looking at those going, they're so horrible. And then something happens.
It's like Mardi Gras on your wrist, some of those watches.
It is, it's a wrist circus. But then something happens. It's almost like a cog clicks into place. And then almost overnight, I look at them and go, these are amazing. How could I have not seen this before? And this happens to me on a regular basis. But now I anticipate that change from disgust to joy with horror. Because of course it means a whole new kind of wallet emptying situation chasm is about to open up.
And that's a really great point, because I find that when something is too easy to love, you only like it. You never become head over heels infatuated with it. I've found that with watches and cars, some that came to mean the most to me were things that initially left me conflicted. They were not easy to resolve, and because of that, I thought about them more. And in the end, because of that weird bond of being betwixt and between... You got it.
He's a watch fan.
Okay, so...
My wife called it in.
I was trying to get out early, come on.
I said, call about 10 minutes into it.
But anyway, my point is that a lot of times you need to give watches a little bit of time to settle in, because the things that leave you conflicted often become the watches you love most. And it's important to know when you're intrigued by a watch versus disgusted by a watch, because there is a difference there. I mean, some people have shown me they're like 48 millimeter XYZs, and I've been like, that's nice. But that's genuinely, I'm not into it. But when you look at something, you're like, I don't know how I feel about this. Give it time. Don't rule it out. Come back to it. Let it mellow.
You know why that is, I think, is because I think aesthetics are a habit.
Okay.
You like what you see the most often. And so when you see something unusual, like if you see a Genta, or even like I'm hugely into early Daniel Roth now, but for a while, and it's not particularly unusual, but the K-shape was disconcerting. Because I have not acquired that aesthetic habit yet. And then as you see it repeatedly again and again, the more you see it, the more your neural pathways kind of reconfigure around this new aesthetic idea, and then you begin to see it for what it is. It was the same for me with 70s watches, with Pateks, the integrated bracelets. Like I looked at them and thought they seemed glitzy or showy in some way. But once I got around the idea of this integrated bracelet, this kind of continuous concept design, then I began to really look at them for what they were. But you have to kind of wear it like an old pair of slippers for a while.
You give them a little bit of time, and I think this sort of moves towards another important element of buying watches and being happy. Don't spend it all in one place. Don't buy them all at one time, and give yourself a period to court the watch. The thing is, you can have memories built around a watch that you just purchased. It's the whole courting, the research, the meeting people, the talking. And once you get that watch, you've got something that's no longer just a purchase, it's an experience. And that is the key to lasting satisfaction. If you just buy something when you're on vacation, throw it back in the closet, and you revisit in 10 years, you're gonna have no bond with that thing. It was bought on impulse, you didn't want it beforehand, you didn't wear it enough to build memories around it. Fall in love with a watch and spend a lot of time doing that. And it's really hard to do for more than one watch at a time. So don't do what I did when I turned 30 and buy 5 watches all at once to make up for lost time. One watch at a time, make it an experience, make it a journey.
You know, something you were saying earlier, actually, when a watch is too easy to love, you kind of almost just like it, is very close to a conversation we were having in the office. My team and I were just discussing the new watch releases, watches and wonders in general, and what makes a good release and what makes a watch interesting. And waxing poetic, we kind of came to the conclusion, if everybody loves a watch release, it's a mediocre release. If 50% of the people love it, and I mean love it, and 50% of the people hate it or are below lukewarm on it, it's a fantastic release.
I'm onto something then.
You are onto something, without a doubt. And I think that speaks loudly to, you know, design language in general. When it appeals to too many people, you know, when everybody wants one, nobody wants one.
Yeah, that's a good thing. If you like, you don't buy. If you love, you do. And Tom Gale, who was design head at Chrysler for about a decade, when they came out with all sorts of show-stopping show cars, the Viper, the Prowler, the Copperhead, the Kronos, just like what a run they had. He said that you really just need a handful of people to love a design for it to be a success, because people who like it, they say, that's nice, and they walk away. So here's a great example of a watch that I could not resolve when I first saw it. Gerald Genta, after the era of Genta, there were a lot of retrograde jump hour watches. So there was the Bi-Retro Arena jump hour in white gold and tantalum. And I looked at it back in 2010 and I thought, this monstrosity. Oh my gosh, this thing. And that was the word that kept invading my mind, this thing. So 4 years later, I bought that watch. And it took me 4 years of trying to figure out how I felt about it before I bought it. There have been some watches that I thought were very, very nice. For example, the 2017 JLC Master Control Sector Dial. That was nice. I didn't buy it. So fall in love with the watch, both the experience of falling in love and then the reality of that white hot passion you can't deny, because when you get there, it's going to be bliss going forward. I will also say another thing you want to do when you are researching watches is lean deep into what Phil talked about. If someone came to me with a Porsche car that I'd never heard of, I know them pretty well, I know their history, I've followed all the race cars, they said there's something you've never seen before, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm shocked. Someone shows me a watch I've never seen every single day. It's just a deeper space. There's more variations, more brands, more creators, more models, and more diversity. You may run into something you never imagined, so follow all the leads and take your time. I mean, I think especially with 70s watches, that's a great example, because the stuff comes out of the woodwork, and sometimes you'll see 5 watches you've never encountered in the space of 1 month.
Sure. Yeah. It's a terrible thing, actually.
I would also say this. Decide whether or not you're a new watch person, because some people will never be satisfied with a pre-owned watch, and those people will wind up buying twice. So, true fact, I know a gentleman who's never bought a new watch. He has over 100 watches, and I'm not talking Tom Ford. These are incredible pieces. If you're wearing a Tom Ford, I apologize. But these are incredible pieces. And time and again, I've told him, I've got exactly what you want, and it's barely worn. He's like, no, I'm a new watch guy. I will never accept someone's wrist cheese, scratches, dents, compromised, or lapsed warranty. And I'm like, okay. You're a new watch person, just like some people are new car people. If you go out and you buy something that you think is a deal, then you get it and it's grosser than you imagined, guys, you're going to buy the watch again. So decide whether you've got to have new watches, because for some people that really is the right answer.
I think that speaks stylistically too. You know, the modern era of watchmaking in general and the shape of the industry has a very, maybe more so lately, has a very 2020s feel to it, despite the fact that I think a lot of designers are trying to go in a direction to kind of reach back into the vintage. There's something about true vintage and neo-vintage that has a malaise of age on it that new watches oftentimes can't compete with.
I'm also going to add this. Know for a fact whether you're a box and paper guy, because you can usually get watches for less money when they're missing accessories. This is a great example. I know a gentleman who's never bought a new watch. He has over 100 watches, and I'm not talking Tom Ford. These are incredible pieces. So, if you're wearing a Tom Ford, I apologize. But The higher you go up the pecking order of watches, and when you get into the Pateks and the Grubels of the world, you really want to have that stuff. And a lot of people wind up getting a watch that is in almost every regard an excellent piece, but in time, the fact that it's compromised by the lack of any kind of history, records, box papers, or invoice, that gets to them. They wind up selling that watch generally for a lot less money than they could have had if they've just bought it right in the first place. It almost seems like it's a car that has a Carfax on its record. You know, you get that Porsche, the price looks right, the thing looks gorgeous, then you realize it was mashed and it's on a salvage title. I want to say that like the naked watches these days, without the box, papers, accessories, and history, they're being treated more and more like the Ferrari with a Carfax on it.
I just bought a watch without box and papers.
I buy
so much, man.
without
Thank
box
you.
and papers often.
I mean, I have. Well, I'm almost entirely a vintage geezer. I find
Where it's not expected, to be fair.
no, shockingly, yeah. Well, I mean, there's the newest I can go is like there's probably Daniel Roth. I mean, I had, and I've tried. I've experimented, Tim. I swear, I've tried. I had some Resonance, which I think is just a really interesting brand. I really like that kind of design language. I had one of those actually, and it's a lovely watch. But there's something about the kind of the fetid, rusty old Swiss cheese. Oh, hang on. He's got a keen insight. No. Shocking news.
This is what happens in New York City when you've got rats big enough to set off the motion sensors. I'm sorry, I apologize. Only on the other floors.
Yeah, not here.
Never here.
Yeah.
But
I thought you were referring to me.
Oh, no. We love you. You get to pick your spirit animal. But I would be happy with rat. Rats are
Same.
resourceful. Okay. And so here's the other thing. Don't buy the cheapest one. Unless you know for a fact that you are going to wear it to death. Like, here's a great example of someone who bought the cheapest watch for a very specific reason. So Mark chose a cool guy. He knows watches. He's not going to buy something ignorantly. He went out and he bought the cheapest Patek Philippe 1526 perpetual calendar he could find. Silver dial, yellow gold, the worst color and metal combination, polished down to a toothpick, ugly as sin, marks from bad watchmaking on the dial, but he had a plan there. He wanted one he could wear every day. And that was his plan. Buy a watch that he is totally cool with scratching, scuffing, denting.
But that would make me crazy. I mean, look, I get I'd rather have a really good watch and then destroy
Wear
it
it every
myself
day, yeah.
than have it having arrived pre-destroyed.
It's like a rat
Is that a
rod,
service
you know?
you guys own? You offer the pre-destroyed service?
I am more than happy to offer the weathered and burnished service for you. For a fee, I can destroy your watch expert.
I think there are people who would pay for that from you.
Yeah, we actually had a thought just before we gathered about selling watches that are just pre-weathered. And I don't mean burnished to look like they're faux vintage like some Panerai. I mean actually bastardized. Like, take a Royal Oak, go at it with pens, pencils, doorknobs, car seatbelt buckles, all the stuff that ruins your watch in real life. Go to town and then sell it that way.
Try to polish it yourself, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Bad watchmaking, a bezel sanded down so that the bolts are higher than the bezel on the Royal Oak, all that stuff. Just sell it that way. People will pay good money to have a watch they don't have to worry about. That is the only time I would say buy the cheapest watch, because if you know that this is going to be something that's it's the equivalent to your daily driver car. The sacrificial lamb so you can drive a Ferrari on the weekend.
Yeah, but then we should drive a Caprice Classic.
This is New York. Those
Like
used to be all
you should
over the
buy an
place.
old cab and just drive it around at all times. That would be the equivalent, right?
You could take that to Radwood. You'd be a hero.
But if you ride around in an old cab, the prices of those old cabs go up almost instantaneously.
It's a Toledano
If I'm
effect.
wearing the fur coat. Yeah.
He shows up with Ben Clymer in an old Caprice Classic. So I would say another thing you want to avoid with watches is, if you're going to buy something sight unseen, don't buy it unless there's some sort of no questions asked return policy. So this is something that's been one of the most controversial and difficult decisions for us to make as long as we've been dealers. If you sell a watch to a person and that person then wears the watch, even if they're careful, it's no longer what you sent them. But we realized that if you're going to be selling things that cost 5, 6 figures to people who never had the opportunity to put it on the wrist, you need to give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't like the way it fits, they don't like the way it feels, or they simply don't like it, period. And instead of having to come up with some story about how your wife is now in the hospital, or, you've just been...
The poor wives, man. It's always the wives who get the blame.
Grandma
like when you're
times.
selling a watch, I have to ask my wife, the wife doesn't like it. It's always the wives who get the blame.
It is. It's always their
What's
fault.
that all? What's that?
You just did it.
Yeah, I did?
Yeah.
Oh,
You
what?
blamed your wife for the fire.
Well, that's because it was true.
You don't have to sell some horrible story to a salesman over the phone and send back your watch, which is why we've always had this roughly 1
Because
week
people are
long.
horrified by the idea of no.
But yeah, exactly.
Like no one wants to say no thank you. People would rather it's the wife or let me mull it over. There's so much mulling happening on Instagram. There's like an excess mull situation. Or
It's a mull fest.
It is. It's mullpalooza.
And look, you don't have to make up some fantastic story, although they are incredibly entertaining, in order to return the watch.
What's the best story?
Oh my God, I had one guy take a picture of himself in a hospital bed with breathing apparatus. But here's
Amazing.
the thing.
Was it a Zoom background or was
The
it real?
photo he sent had metadata suggesting it had been taken years prior.
Yeah, but I like the fact that you looked at the metadata. That is a high level of OCD, man.
I mean, I don't believe this guy was hospitalized because it's too much of a coincidence.
That's amazing.
The day the watch was delivered, you signed for it, man. Now,
He crawled out of bed and then got back into bed.
Yeah, you're right. The ambulance rolled him back up to his mailbox.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
I
right.
don't know. But that was very funny. But again, you should just be able to return the watch. And if you have some all sales final BS from a guy who's selling you a watch on the other side of the country or another continent, that's a big red flag. That's a guy who's too eager to take your money or too eager to take your money and then disappear with it. So always insist on a right of return if you don't like the watch. Buying remotely is always a risk. You deserve the benefit of the doubt. What other experiences have you had? Because you bought watches all over the world. How do you feel about buying a watch on vacation? Yes, no, or maybe?
I've never have.
You never found some watch
Because I
down
feel
in
like
the islands,
because I'm off with the family, and I feel like buying watches is like a sort of a furtive, slightly disgusting behavior that I don't really want to show people. I don't want my family to see me golluming over a watch. So watch buying always happens in the middle of the night on the internet, and everyone else is asleep.
Your wife sees you looking at the screen, assumes the worst.
Nothing. I'm just buying a watch.
I swear, honey. No,
Yeah.
I just like the pictures for the artistic value.
Also, because the kind of I find that also because I'm such a vintage person. If I go into a store, I just feel like I'm getting pickpocketed.
Really? Okay.
I don't know why. Even if it's a vintage store, it's so rare. I have to feel like I'm doing. Maybe it's because I've been in New York for 30 years, but I have to feel like there's some handling happening. Like I'm wearing the guy down, and finally he's giving in. He's taking X amount or whatever it is. I'm very peculiar about buying watches.
Okay, well that's interesting. I got to ask, since all your watches are vintage, do you have any watches you can take swimming at all? And how'd you pick that watch?
No. I could have an intern swim.
Swim. Oh, so you have a person swim for you?
Yeah.
Oh,
With
okay.
a swimming watch.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Swim by surrogate. Okay. So, Armand, question: can a watch be too big, and how do you know when it's too big?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends. If you want a clock on your wrist, you can put a clock on your wrist. I'm not going to tell anybody that their style is wrong to their face.
I will.
I think,
and he definitely will.
I think
but in a very charming way.
I think the general rule of thumb is, you kind of can't go by pictures. You kind of can't go by directly looking down at your wrist. But, the general rule with that is that if the lugs are eclipsing your wrist, or if you don't have any meat on either side of the 6 to midnight measurement of the lugs, the lug extremity to lug extremity, it's too big.
See, this is the kind of conversation just to mention my wife again, she'll walk past, I'm on the phone, we talk about lug extremity, how big is your wrist? It's all very, very unsavory.
Hey, listen, solid 7-incher right here, okay?
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm like, how big's yours? Mine's 7. And she goes, no, it's not.
But
But also the size thing is interesting because this watch, come on you OCD bastards. How big do you think this watch is? Just out of interest.
Well, how are you measuring?
How are you measuring?
The width of this watch.
It's like 30.
Who said that?
35?
How dare you? 33. But the point is that watches wear differently. Like it can be a 42 mil watch or 40 mil if it has no lugs, or if it's the shape, if it's an integrated bracelet. Like I have Pateks from the 70s that are 28 mil, but they have integrated bracelet and they wear much larger. So the size thing is almost, it's kind of a, for lack of a better word, misnomer.
I go by wingspan, so this is how I look at this. If the watch is just
8
lugs,
horsepower.
well, yeah, of course. Well, we're sticking to watches and cars. Okay, I don't have a budget for planes, not yet anyway. But my point is that you look at the total distance across the wrist. So if you got something like an IWC Big Pilot's watch, that's on a strap. You know if the lugs are hanging out over your wrist, it's too much. But now there are some watches that don't seem that big on paper. A lot of things with integrated bracelets where you're like, oh, this is only a 39 millimeter Royal Oak, but that 39 millimeter Royal Oak wears like a 41 or a 42. So you look at the total distance across the wrist. When you can't compress it anymore, that's the distance across the wrist. And you got to reckon with whether you want a lot of overhang and a watch that's going to hula hoop and look a little bit comical, or you're going to wear it for the effect. And some people do like to wear their watches loose, and that's fine if you're that guy.
I will say on the other end of that, there is no lower limit for size for me, personally.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? Because you're a vintage guy, and some of those are the size of like a quarter.
I'm okay with that. I mean, I will say that there's a weird thing happens when you wear small watches, is that it's surprisingly instantly elegant, I find. It's weird. Like you put on a small watch and you feel very suave.
Okay.
Or not, but you just
There's
feel elegant.
a classiness about it.
Yeah, there's something really lovely about a very
Gianni
small watch.
Agnelli, that sort of thing.
Kind of.
Yeah, you got a small watch, but the guy's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. I would say, yeah, that's the way to kind of get away with wearing a smaller watch. A vintage watch is beautifully discreet and classical. Now, would I necessarily, I had a 30 millimeter Vacheron the other week. Do I recommend you go wear a brand new 30 millimeter watch? I'm not sure you can get away with that. But I will say
You can, but I think it's very clothing dependent.
You got to wear that on your thumb.
No, I think that when you're wearing a smaller watch, what you're wearing matters more. Weirdly, I'm not sure why that matters, but it does. Like if you're dressed in an interesting manner, you can just kind of pull it off. But if you're wearing jeans and t-shirt and a 24, well, I mean, maybe you could pull it off too. But for me, at least, clothing matters when it's small.
I completely agree, and for some reason, Timothée Chalamet is coming to mind immediately with this
that's
because you have somebody with an interesting sense of style, an interesting watch collection in general. Whether or not all of them are his is up to debate. But you have a guy who wears the 28 millimeter Cartier Panther, and it looks awesome. It looks so cool. Mick Jagger has one of those too, and famously has worn that. So it really does depend. If you're dressed like a rock star or the somewhat edgy French last name actor, it's going to work. It's going to work for you.
He's actually helped me out tremendously because looking like a emaciated Tour de France rider, you were never a sex symbol until Timothée Chalamet.
You're going to be dating a Kardashian next, Tim.
I know, right? That's like polar opposites.
Tim and Kim, let's go. I'm pulling for that now.
But my point is, you said you had a military phase at one point.
I did.
I had a military phase too. It was in the Navy. And when I was in the Navy...
So it was real. I was cosplay. You were the real thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and I still got a lot of the stuff too. But I had this chance to buy the original Omega X33 for $700. Full box, full papers, all the accessories, totally legit on the Kevlar strap. And it was a military purchase opportunity, only for people in the service. It was off the market by then. I just had to sign this piece of paper saying I wouldn't sell it for 3 years. And every once, like in your lifetime, you'll come up with a deal that is both too good to be true and yet somehow still true. I feel like we all get that one shot in our life as a collector. If you do find yourself confronted with that situation, have the presence of mind to realize it and pull the trigger. Every once in a while, you just got to say, look, it's now or never. Like, as calculating as I am, when you got your shot, take it.
That happened to me twice last year.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you take it?
Yeah.
What
I
was
saw the shot, I took it, to quote Tom
you
Cruise
hit
in
the
Top
target?
Gun.
Did you buzz the tower?
He was in the Navy in that movie.
That's right. Well, because I'm a real fan of buying watches that get passed over at auction. Because people think there's something wrong with them immediately. There's so much but one was a Rolex Zerograph, which was a dream of mine for years. I never thought I'd own one. And then sometimes watches at auctions just fall down a wormhole. Like people forget about them. It's the wrong time. It's an auction in a place where no one's really interested in those watches.
Was this like Watches of Knightsbridge or something?
No, it was a Sotheby's auction, but it was a Sylvester Stallone one. Remember that?
So the Zerograph got passed on that?
Yeah, because I was waiting for it, and I was like, "There's no way. I'm never gonna be able to buy that." And then I was at lunch, and with a friend, he was like, "That Zerograph was passed." So I called up immediately. I was like, "Can I buy that watch?"
That's awesome.
That blows me away that got passed over.
Yeah.
Sly's Zerograph?
No, it's not Sly's Zerograph.
Oh, I thought you said it was that
No, it was
auction.
it was a Sly auction.
Got it.
Like they were selling his whole collection, so that sort of eclipsed all the other stuff.
Got it.
Do you guys remember when he had that RM custom piece? I want to say it was like a version.
With the water purification tablets?
Yeah. With the iodine tablet to investigate whether presumably a senior citizen with $1 million watch could survive in the wild unassisted. Yeah. All I can say is if you got that watch, I'm very conflicted. I'll just say it's a technically interesting watch, but when we talked earlier about having two feelings about a watch, liking some things, not liking others, being unresolved, I'm not unresolved about that watch. There is such a thing as an ugly watch.
What is that watch?
It was a camo combat cosplay tourbillon with an iodine tablet to purify water so you don't get giardia.
There's also a compass complication on it. There is a bezel that I think folds up.
It's as big as a fist.
It's maybe bigger.
So yeah, I mean, here's the thing about watch collecting. There's a lot of fun ways to get into the hobby, and I would say sometimes spending more is not going to make you happier. Sometimes it can. I read an article saying that spending $20,000 gives you the uplifting equivalent of getting married, which in the long run is a much better deal.
Is there a number that gives you the feeling of getting divorced?
I think that's when you sell the collection.
Right.
So my point is that sometimes
That's when you give away half of it.
I actually feel like the when you get the super bargoon,
okay.
that there's such that those watches hold like a special place when you feel like you've bested the world. Do you know what I mean? Like the Zerograph was, it was a shitload of money, but in the context of Zerographs, it was peanuts. And so for that, you feel like you've won somehow when that happens.
Value is a relative thing. Like if you get a watch that should cost as much as a, Lamborghini Veneno and only costs as much as like a Lamborghini Urus, you did really well. But my point is that sometimes
then you check the Carfax.
Yeah, or that's going to spoil your fun. Or
That's
you
right.
take it to a detailer and he's like, "Man, I hate to say this, but like this has had paint."
Sure.
Oh, why did you tell me? Some detailers will literally like say, "If I find paint on this, I don't want to destroy your relationship with the car. Do you want to know about it?"
That's actually why I don't want to be friends with people who know everything. I used to have a podcast and I had Goldberger on, and I was wearing a Patek Beta 21, and we were just kind of chatting before we started recording, and he's like, "Let me see that watch." And I was like, "Oh fuck, he's gonna see it," and I take it off, and he's just looking at it and I'm like, "Oh no, he's gonna say it." I was waiting to tell me it was fine, but I realized then I just would prefer not to wear a watch in front of someone who knows everything. That's the best thing you can take away from this conversation.
Now, what could he have said that would have hurt
I don't know,
the
like
watch
he would
for you?
he saw some hallmark, and I was like, "Oh, I thought." I didn't even know what he could have said. I would just immediately assume it was going to be horrible. I immediately assumed he was going to see something that was
Mark 1 dial with a Mark
exactly,
4
whatever.
bezel with
Because
a Mark
there's
3
so much.
case.
Because there's so much stuff I don't know.
Much nuance.
I really know nothing. So yeah, it was terrifying.
You know what I would do at that point? I'd be like, I'd put
Feign
on
a seizure.
I'd put on something I know he's never heard of. I'd put on like a Swatch watch or a G-Shock. I'd be like, "Tell me about this."
She put on an Invicta.
Tell me about, yeah, there you go. And funny thing, I once saw an Invicta for 97% off.
Wow.
I think that's their normal discount range.
Yeah. Well, I was in there and I was looking to build a relationship.
You were tempted.
Yeah.
You were
well,
tempted.
you want to have a purchase history with Invicta in case something really hot comes out.
That's right.
So I'm at the dealer.
You guys are going to be stocking Invicta here, right?
This is going to be a new boutique.
This is an announcement. You're making an announcement.
We bought out
that's
Costco.
Right.
Invicta boutique, full retail only.
That's right. No discounts.
No discounts. Not here.
What you see is what you pay. So yeah, I'm at the dealer on the Jersey Turnpike, and in between like going to the bathroom and getting a hot dog, I'm at the Invicta dealer.
That is a big dealer, by the way.
That's one of their largest authorized dealers.
Is that really a dealer?
It is, yeah.
Wow.
Rest stop, Jersey.
Up.
I forget which one. It's not the Woodrow Wilson. I stopped there today. Stockton. Okay.
It's the Stockton rest
I
stop.
feel like you've been.
He
Stand up, stand up.
The watch transactions taking place in the parking lot of that rest stop are more legitimate than the ones taking place inside it. I would say this though, like in terms of price is a very contentious subject, and a lot of people start to feel locked into this idea that they have to spend ever more to get the same buzz. So I spoke to an editor from a blog to watch, really nice guy. It wasn't Ariel, it was one of his lieutenants. But he's talking about how he, started at 2,000, then he went up to like 6, then he went up to 10, then he went up to 15, and he was working up the resources and the courage to get into the $20,000 range. And I'm sitting there thinking, dude, if it's taken that much time and planning to get to 20 grand, have you given any thought to looking back at the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 watch or the $2,000 watch? Because there's some great vintage pieces that don't cost a lot of money. Geneva Hallmark for under 10 grand from Vacheron in the mid-50s. There are some watches like the MIH watch that were designed by Christian Gaffner and built by Paul Gerber and engineered by Ludwig Oxlin, and you can still buy them for under 10 grand today. And they're incredible feats of engineering and design. But if you're not out there looking for something unusual in that price range, you're never going to find it sorting with the $20,000 and up tool on Chrono 24. Every once in a while, you do get that same rush from a watch that's it's exciting and costs less money and makes you feel like you conquered Olympus, just something you never saw coming. So don't think that the progression is naturally from low price to high price and then you die. Sometimes you can regress a little bit.
I'm on the cusp of death. Right now.
It's funny. There was this this cartoon I saw where it's like the progression of the watch collector, and it's like Rolex is the best watch in the world. Then Rolex is not the best watch in the world. Only Patek Philippe. Tourbillons and complications. Just one good watch. Dead.
And then after death, it's Rolex is the best watch in the world again.
Yeah, right. Well, are you going to heaven or hell? No comment. Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question.
I think we all know.
This is being recorded. Okay. So, how do you define an individual style? When do you know what you like, and how do you got to work through some mistakes, but when do you know?
Well, I guess I never know what I like. I know what I like now.
You knew out of the gate, though, that you liked vintage.
Yeah.
How did you reach that conclusion without making a bunch of mistakes?
Actually, that's not true. The very first watch I bought when I started working in advertising in 1993, I bought a Speedmaster new on 47 for $900, and that was like, and it was before anyone was wearing Speedmaster, and I loved it because I'm obsessed with space travel. It's a whole thing for me. Many nerd holes.
I've been called a spaceman.
I'm shocked.
In different contexts.
Yeah.
Continue.
I don't know, like I know what I like now, but I'm really clearly aware that what I like now may be radically different from what I like in a week's time or in a month's time. But I find that, this is the thing I would say, that whatever you collect should reflect who you are. And it should not reflect who everyone else is. And I think that's what happens a lot, is that people, the gravitational pull of Instagram. Instagram is an incredibly effective tool at making you think you like things that you might not like.
Yes.
I remember I bought a gold sub, a 1608. But I bought that watch because I kept seeing on Instagram. I thought, this is a really beautiful watch. I really would love one. I bought one. I had it, and I thought, I made a mistake. I'm not interested. But I kind of was convinced by the power of Instagram, by the repetitive viewing. So you have to really be able to resist that gravitational pull of seeing the things all the time and having them hypnotize you to thinking you like them.
That is absolutely, you can jump in, but let me say that is absolutely true. You can get programmed by social media, and it's very easy to fall into someone else's dream loop and never get out of it. So every once in a while, just go out into the internet, type in jump hours, and see what comes up. It will be endless. Find a way of getting away from the stuff you like, even if it means visiting forums on Time Zone or Watch Pro site for brands you have no interest in. Go check out Roger Dubuis, and you'll find that all of a sudden your eyes open and you start thinking differently. But go back.
I think it's really easy to convince oneself or see oneself in particular watches and particular clothing. And one thing that we have to remember with these are, for the most part, relatively mass-marketed, mass-produced items in general. So, the idea of individuality in the watch space is very interesting because, unless you have a piece unique, even if you have a piece unique, it's based in something. It's not truly a piece unique unless you're wearing a Meteorite Dream watch, and I think that, being that we're all into this in general means that we all have a base level of commonality in the first place. And I think it's very easy to convince yourself that, we'll take hype watches for an example. A hype watch.
Don't look at me.
We'll just call a 5711, for example. Yeah, I'd love to wear a 5711. It's awesome. Is it my favorite watch? Absolutely not. Do I want to go out and buy one? Absolutely not. There are guys definitely out there that, maybe remember the original release of the Nautilus and hence have a closer connection to something like a 5711.
Yeah, if you genuinely have a decades-long association with the model, it was part of your childhood, it was something you promised yourself when you got your first job, then it means something to you. And I often find that a watch can be 100% generic, but what makes it yours is the stories you build around it. That is how it becomes your Speedmaster, or your 5711, or your Daytona.
And to that point directly, I'm sure we all know of or have heard of, gosh, I don't even know if it's still his handle, @SpanishRob on Instagram and hashtag the Loved Patek. The Loved Patek was a Tiffany stamped 5711 1A that unfortunately did get stolen, but there was something about his wearing of that watch, and the thing that it was he wore it everywhere. He wore it absolutely everywhere. He would wear it shooting guns. He would wear it riding jet skis. He would wear it, at a desk. And despite the fact that it did become a hype watch, A, he had it before it was cool, and B, the watch really did just encompass what he was as a watch collector because he wore it and he beat the ever-loving snot out of it. And, it is really a shame that it got stolen because it's, I don't know, I still look back at that piece and, the 2014 to 2018 Instagram, watch collecting kind of bubble and think of it extremely fondly. It's a fond memory. And I think, just because something is hyped, to directly contradict what I said earlier, doesn't mean you can't kind of have that personal direct connection and collect it for the right reason, so to speak.
Yeah. Also, guys, I want to just thank all of you for being part of our podcast recording, and absolutely grateful for all of you coming out on an afternoon before work really ends to be part of this. And
I think that's the reason why.
Well, in that case, you're welcome. But I do want to open the floor to some questions because we got some panelists who've been around the world and done everything in watches. Yes.
So you mentioned large watches like 46 millimeters and up. But how does that work? Because I've seen you with Azimuth, Mr. Roboto.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is the way it's shaped, and also the fact that it is absolutely not designed to be taken in earnest. Something along the lines of like a 44 millimeter Royal Oak Offshore is not the kind of watch that you hope will make people laugh at you. But when you're wearing a robot head with a face on your wrist, there is nothing serious about that watch, except it's serious fun.
Otland centers the chat.
Yeah, believe it or not, there's a bigger Mr. Roboto than that. That's the small one. So I wear that watch because I'm willing to laugh at myself and frequently invite others to do the same.
And further that has the RM effect. It has effectively a tonneau-shaped case, and those watches, that shape of watch, to me, wears like a cuff. It doesn't wear like a normal timepiece in general, and I truthfully don't think it's meant to.
Yeah, again, it's a watch that is shaped like a non-watch object. So it's not over the edge of my wrist, so I guess if that's your yardstick, we're good. But again, that is the most self-effacing, ridiculous concept. If you go on the website that sells it, they lead with stink bombs. So after they open with stink bombs, it's kind of downhill from there. You can't be too proud wearing that watch, but it's fun. I think at the end of the day, you need to be comfortable whether you're watching Mr. Roboto on your wrist or some Patek Philippe, 1518 type complication from the 40s. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for the engaging conversation. I have a question for all three of you. If you were invited to the Met Gala, what watch would you wear, or would you wear a watch?
Well, the self-serving answer would be my own watch. I mean, I would be dumb not to. But if it wasn't that, I will actually say one of the irritating things about having a watch brand is I always have to wear this bloody watch, and all the watches I spend all this time like collecting, I don't wear those that much anymore. I don't know. I just wear something. I would make sure I would wear something that no one else was wearing. That there was no chance anyone else would have that watch. So maybe the Zerograph.
My grandfather's watch. He got it for 25 years of repairing electronics at Remington. He retired in 1973. It's 10 karat gold filled. It's a 35 millimeter yellow gold Omega DeVille. And it was his, now it's mine. And I know he would never have gotten into a thing like that in his lifetime. So if I were lucky enough to be there, I'd be representing the family.
I think I would have to go with, and you know, AP is generally not my answer to almost any horological question. Not that I don't like the brand, far from it, in fact. But I think I would have to go with a hot jewelry piece from AP, something outrageous. A few years ago, I think it was Serena Williams wore, gosh, I'm blanking on the name, but it was a huge spiky piece of jewelry that you flip open one of the spikes and there's a small quartz clock in there. And I think something like that is right up my alley. Other than that, probably
This guy got married without shoes on his feet.
And a shirt, actually, without shirt and shoes.
The suit was great.
This is part of it. Other than that, I think something like an RM69 erotic tourbillon, just for the fun factor of it. And I mean, you're at the Met Gala, you know, there's beautiful people everywhere. You want them to say the phrases that come up on that watch.
It's not often I take photos at SIHH that I can't share with the internet, but that watch was one of them. Other folks, questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I have a question. A great question, by the way. My question is more, how do you know when it's time to make room for another watch? Is it
Consolidation.
Well, is it a function of I haven't worn it in a while, or?
I'm
Start with Phil on this one.
I always get a brisk savaging for selling things all the time because there's like 60 or 65% of the watches I've had for a while, for years, but then there's probably 30% that are always churning because that's this sort of experimental section. I guess, well, I think what happens often is I'll look at the watch box and I'll realize I haven't worn something in a long time, and I'll realize that I have no real connection to it anymore. And I'll also realize that I would rather sell that and experience something new. Like the idea of experiencing something new is stronger to me than this thing that I never wear.
It's emotionally driven.
Yeah.
For me, the most obvious answer is I flat out made a mistake. We buy watches that turn out not to be what we wanted, or they're not our style, or we grow away from them. Good example, the first high-end watch I ever bought was a JLC Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm, which is pretty much everything the name implies. A huge watch that had a world time, quick release lugs, an alarm with a digital setting mechanism, compressor crowns, an inner case made of titanium, an outer case made of steel, and allegedly you could play the hammer game at a carnival and not break it. I thought that was an incredible watch because I was technically in awe of it, and it was everything I thought it would be on that front. But it was also too big for me. It was a big block, it was a big brick, I never felt comfortable wearing it, it wasn't my personality. I'm not the type of guy to pull up in like a Geländewagen with 6 wheels and 3 axles, and I think maybe if you're that guy with a larger-than-life personality, a Texas type cowboy, you know what I mean? Or a rock star, Lemmy from Motorhead, the rock star. Then maybe you can wear a watch like that. I couldn't, and I decided that in the end what I liked were smaller, complicated, sort of low-key dress watches, and that's what I stuck with.
I think I might be a bit of an outlier in this, but I feel like when I'm buying a watch or I'm, you know, waxing poetic about buying a watch, I can tell if it's something that is a true long-term piece. And when I say long-term, I mean, you know, 10 plus years. For example, this, I consolidated 5 watches into this actually, and every single one of the watches that I consolidated, I remember when I purchased them, and I knew that when something better came around, this was on the chopping block. to me, there is nothing better than this, and hence it will not be on the chopping block. In this category, I should say.
You know, the other thing actually, the other thing I think about is can I find this watch again?
Yes.
And if I can find the watch again, then it makes me want to sell it, because I would rather like whittle my watch. And it's not about money; it's about like aesthetics and rarity for me. Like when you go to the horological sausage party, you want to be the one geezer with this watch. You don't want to see like 15 examples. You know what I mean? So I've sold watches because I feel like I can just buy that watch again. What's the point in owning it?
I feel the same way about cars, to be honest.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Just a follow up to that question, have in your journey, have you ever gotten to a point where you're like, you know what, I've got everything already. I'm done. I don't need any more watches.
No.
Not
That's
everything.
disgusting.
But I am,
Get out. Get out.
not to that point, but I'm currently in the place with my personal collection that I live in my collection. I love my collection. I love what I have. There is nothing at an affordable price point for me personally that I want in my collection that I don't already have in some capacity. And I probably shouldn't say this. It feels amazing. It feels so good to go in my watch drawer and have a couple of options.
How dare you.
Each one of them I
Like Scrooge
absolutely
McDuck
love.
diving into the money.
And it's something that I truthfully never expected to get to that place. But you know, the watches that I wear regularly have become a part of me. The watches that I've had for the better part of a decade are in a collection and aren't going anywhere. I may wear some a little bit less than others. I mean, you know how often I wear this. So I think it's really hard to get into that place, and that place is a very temporary place. But I've been living in it for probably like 2 years now, and it feels really good.
I'm at the same spot.
Do we have any questions, comments, suggestions?
Outrage. Surely someone's outraged.
All right, we talked about the right way, the wrong way, the worst way to buy and collect watches. We had a bomb threat. You were incredibly patient. Well done to all, and thank you for recording the podcast with us.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.